All right. Jerry says we're on. Boy, y'all quieting down real quick. Okay, I've already got some on the prayer list. Pat Cook. What's the latest on her, you know? She's at UAB. Okay. All right, and I don't know how many of you know about the wreck that happened over the weekend down at the Causeway. I found out today. I didn't even know about it till today, but that young lady that died, she worked with me for several years. And so remember the Bragg family? Bragg. I don't know their names. They own the Bragg's Fish Market. Huh? Oh, she is? Okay. I never didn't really know, other than her being rear-ended. I don't know if it stalled out. I don't know if she was stopped or what. Um, and I worked for a man for many years that has got cancer. I'd like for you to remember Kenny Cleveland when you pray. Uh, Continue praying for Tina. And, huh? Kevin Shaver. Who? The Tanner family. There's a lot going on. Larry Hunt family. Steve Martin family. Yeah, I grew up around Barry. I never did know Steve. Randy Evers. Okay. I think it's the first time I've seen on my prayer list that we've got as many uh, lost, those that have lost a loved one, their families, as we do people that's sick. That's rough. What about your youngin's trip? Good. How many? How many went on that trip? You know, 14. Okay. Yeah, they're gonna need it. Anybody else? Leslie, job hunting for the Justin. How'd that? Oh, really? Wow. Yeah, it is. Okay. We'll keep him in our prayers. Anybody else? June the 2nd. Yeah, let's remember Terry Halliwell. All right, I about got my sheet filled up. Good job. Anybody else? Sure. Better pray for Ron. That's the last one, right? What's her name? Rachel what? W-E-I-R. Okay. Um, y'all remember Jerry Dyson? I think he's wearing a heart monitor now. So he wasn't real pleased with the way the doctors done him. So y'all just y'all pray for the doctors. All right. Anybody else? All right. Cody, would you go lead us in prayer? Thank you. Okay. Chapter 10 of Matthew. We're going to read the whole section that I wanted to cover tonight. Main reason is, and then we'll go back and cover it, is the 23rd verse. We're going to start at 16, read through 23. But the 23rd verse kind of puts it in perspective. So I wanted to read the whole thing so it would all line up. But Jerry said I couldn't put all that on the screen if I wanted to see it, so we're going to split it up. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils and scourge you in their synagogues. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, do not worry about how or what you should speak, for it will be given to you in that hour what you should speak. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. Now brother will deliver up brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end will be saved. When they persecute you in this city, flee to another, for assuredly I say to you, you will not have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Now, the key phrase of that is before the Son of Man comes, because a lot of this has to do with end-time persecution. I've mentioned dual applications before. This has to do with some they will face while they're alive, and it's also applying to those that will be persecuted later on. It says the Son of Man comes. Of course, that speaks of his second coming. of Jesus at the end of the tribulation. Okay, some of you were not in here when we studied Revelation and Daniel. Who was in here? Okay, several that was not. Okay, so I'm going to give you a real quick, short version rundown. First thing that happens is the rapture of the church. That's the first big thing we're looking for. Immediately after that, the 7-year tribulation begins right after the rapture and goes to 7 years. The 3.5 years in won't be as bad as the last 3.5 years. The last 3.5 years, the Antichrist reveals himself, which he had been there all along, the 7 years, but he turns really ugly the last 3.5. And at the end of the tribulation is when Jesus comes back. So a lot of this that's going to take place will be during that time of the 7 years. So I mentioned when we started Matthew that we'll be covering a little more of the end time stuff when we get to Matthew 24 and chapter 25. Both of those have to do with the end times. And Mark chapter 13 and Luke chapter 21. And so when we covered Revelation and Daniel, we did reference Matthew in some of the different places. And when we get to 24 and 25, we'll be referencing back to Revelation and Daniel and Mark and Luke and try to tie it all together. So 24 and 25 might take a while, if what we've already done is any indication. But I'd like to get it thorough enough covered that it wouldn't be muddy water to you anymore. I mean, I know what we did in Revelation. Some of you had never studied it before, and that's a lot to take in. And Daniel too. But as we go through Matthew 24 and 25, it will come together more. And those of you that didn't go through it with us, it's on YouTube. Go back and get it. All right. So some of the things Jesus taught in verse 5 through 42 of this chapter applied only to the apostles, yet in principle they apply to his witnesses in every generation, all the way through the end of the age and through the tribulation. So a good example of how this scripture is laid out is in Micah, where Jesus is first coming and is ruling Israel and the entire earth. At his second coming seem to be blended together in just 3 verses. So I want to read Micah 5, 2 through 4. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are a little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall come forth to me the one to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth are from old, from everlasting. Therefore he shall give them up until the time that she who is in labor has given birth. Then the remnant of his brethren shall return to the children of Israel. And he shall stand and feed his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall abide, for now he shall be great to the ends of the earth. So just as those 3 verses covered from his birth through the tribulation time into the millennial kingdom, that's the way these verses kind of flow, and it all goes together. Now, I'm sure y'all are very confused by now, and if anybody can explain how to get out of it, I'd like for you to do so, because this is the best I knew how to do. And those of you, there's just a handful of you that gets my copies of my notes. So, my wife is one of those, and she's kind of my critique person. So, as I make mess-ups in my notes, don't worry about it. It was for me to know what I was talking about. So, so remember what I said during the class, and when you look at those notes. So, my wife kind of got on me about this one, but I explained it better in person, right? Okay. Because it don't look that good on my note. All right, on this brief mission, the 12 were sent out, and there's no record on this mission of any harsh persecution. And they didn't raise the dead until after Jesus had ascended, after his resurrection. So all this is in the book of Acts, if you want to go back and read it. But the part where he said raise the dead, let's go back and read 10, verse 8 in this chapter. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Freely you have received, and freely give. So he mentioned raise the dead, but they had no idea that he was talking about it would be later. They probably assumed it would be this mission that they'd be on. Can you imagine having all that on you and never had been sent out before? What a mission. All right, any questions so far? Comments? All right, I want to go back and read verse 16. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. The word behold, Jesus is simply wanting the 12 to pay close attention to what he's about to tell them. They and the rest of his followers are the sheep. All of us that's been saved are the sheep. So anybody here ever raised sheep or had sheep? All right, we got one sheep herder. Are they as helpless as everybody says they are? Okay, I thought so. Yeah. All right, so we're the sheep. What does that tell you about us? They're some of the most helpless and dependent of all domesticated creatures. And they're very humble creatures. The only defense they have is to run. And they can't do that very good. It looks clumsy. So the normal danger for sheep is that wolves come in among them, not that they go out to the wolves. So Jesus is saying, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Right backwards to what nature has for the sheep. So we as sheep have Jesus as our good shepherd. I want to read John 10, 11 through 15. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. But a hireling, he who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and am known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. It says to be wise as serpents. In that ancient time, serpents symbolized wisdom, smart, cunning, cautious. It said harmless as doves. All you dove hunters, I'm going to leave it there. They represent being pure or innocent. So those are qualities that us as children of God are to have as we go out among the wolves, which turn out to be men, mankind. All right, so having Jesus as our example. Pay attention to these. Hebrews 7:26. For such a high priest was fitting for us, who is holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, and has become higher than the heavens. On that one, where it says separate from sinners, do you remember where the Pharisees were griping because he was having supper or dining with the sinners and the tax collectors? Yet he was separate. He was among them, but his life was separate. Okay, 1 Peter 2:23. Who, when he was reviled, did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously. So there was a higher state of mind than what was happening to him at the time. He knew he needed to please his God. That's what we need to do, regardless of what's going on around us. Now, our American way is get hit back. That's what a lot of our movies show. Jesus never did this. He had some of the most horrible things done and said to him, and yet stayed humble. All right, in Luke 6:27. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Now, how that's difficult. We discussed that back when we were doing the Beatitudes. And especially in our American culture, we've had it so good so long, it's hard to love your enemies and do good to them. But that's what Jesus expects. Okay, any questions or comments before we do 17 and 18? Okay, let's read 17 and 18. But beware of men, which are the wolves, for they will deliver you up to councils and scourge you in their synagogues. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. So the human beings, the men, are the agents of Satan, which is our ultimate enemy. Satan uses people just like God uses people. All right. Remember in the Beatitudes, Matthew 5, verse 10 and 11. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. So when we're going through those things, to remember those blesseds are really important to keep us in line. At this time, the disciples had not yet experienced persecution, and resistance to Jesus was only minimum at this point. All right, it said to scourge you in their synagogues. So persecution would come from religion, which has happened all through time. All the crusades and all those different things, all kinds of persecution from religion. In New Testament times, the scourge usually consisted of 39 lashes with a whip, one short of the 40 allowed in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 3. Oh yeah, by the way, a scourge was a whip that at the end of it had bone or metal tied to it where it ripped the flesh. All right, governors represent any office or body below the national level. And then kings represent the heads of state. He said, for my sake is what this suffering would come. The world attacks Christians when it actually sees Christ in us. If it don't see Christ in us, we'll probably not get any persecution. So wonder sometime. Wonder about your own self and how people treat you. If they treat you like the world, we might be acting like the world. I've seen that, been that. And it was a rude awakening in my life. I'm going to read John 15, verse 18, 19. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. All because We're connected to Jesus. So a lot of the persecution, especially in the end times, is going to be through government, through religion. Both of them is going to be huge. So the government is established by God but manipulated by Satan. So our Christian lives testify against them and the unbelieving pagans, which it refers to as Gentiles. All right, verse 19 and 20. But when they deliver you up, do not worry about how or what you should speak, for it will be given to you in that hour what you should speak. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. So, I don't know if y'all have ever read some of the martyrs' last words. You can look it up. It'll give you a list of different martyrs and the things they last said. But God gave them a special presence of mind to present what they presented in their last words that normally wouldn't have come out in any other time. But in those times of duress, the Lord gave them what to say. And some of it will stick with you. All right, verse 21. Now brother will deliver up brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. Now, this does refer a lot to the tribulation time, but during Roman persecutions of the 2nd and 3rd centuries, a large number of Christians were betrayed to civil authorities by a brother, a father, or a child. And there's been some cultures that held funeral services for their families if they became Christians, as if they were dead. What a horrible thing. I want to read Micah 7, verse 6, which prophesied of this long before Christ. For son dishonors father, daughter rises against her mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own household. And then in Mark 13, verse 12 and 13. Now brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end shall be saved. So this will become more prevalent during the tribulation time. Now verse 22, I want to read it. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end will be saved. So this repeated pretty much what that last part of Mark said. And hated by all is just like believers have been hated by different races and nationalities and different parts of mankind in different parts of the world. This too will be more prevalent during the tribulation time. All right, it says, he who endures to the end will be saved. Now, I've discussed this with different people and had different views on it, but it's really pretty simple. We are saved by grace through faith. Well, I think we can all agree with that. It's been preached to us numerous times, and it's all in God's Word. And endurance is an evidence of salvation. It doesn't cause salvation to be enduring. It's evidence that you have been saved and you're a child of God. Any questions or comments? Anybody? I've heard stuff along those lines. For North Korea, yeah. That's awful. I mean, how can... I know we have the United Nations and all these different organizations that's supposed to keep things sort of in line, but it makes me wonder why the world powers allow stuff like that to happen. I don't understand. Maybe I just don't know enough about the government. My government teacher would say that, I'm sure. But there's really a lot of horrible things and inhumane things goes on that's allowed that I still don't understand. And that's where our prayers need to come in. All right, verse 23. When they persecute you in this city, flee to another, for assuredly I say to you, you will not have gone through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Now, can you imagine what went through these 12 men's minds when he said this? First of all, they weren't sure about when he would come. They kept asking questions along those lines. And then, second of all, there's only so far you can go to cover all the Israel cities, and they had to think it must be going to happen soon. But he was referring to just before he comes at the end of the tribulation. So a lot of these things will not come together for these 12 apostles until after Jesus has ascended in the book of Acts. Some of you have been going through the book of Acts for a while, haven't you, in Sunday school? It's very, very interesting how the beginning of the church took place and how these men developed. Peter was like he was a totally different person after he started preaching in Acts. I mean, it was incredible. The Holy Spirit took a hold of him and just made something out of him so powerful. And then when Paul came along, we've got the majority of our New Testament written by him. So God really worked in a powerful way through the early church. And if anybody here knows how denominations started, I would like to know, because in the Bible, it's the church at Corinth, it's the church at Ephesus, all these different places, it's just the church. And man, just like everything else, man's tried to mess it up. So just to be a Bible-believing church, us as a non-denominational, I've gotten to like that more and more because of all the different messes that's in different denominations. We just simply believe what the Word of God says. And I love that. That's the way it ought to be. All right. Oh, yeah, there was one other thing I was going to say. This was the pattern the Apostle Paul followed throughout his ministry. All these things he's mentioned in these verses we've read, the principles of how to minister, the Apostle Paul was a great example. And if you want to do a lot of reading, that would be Acts chapter 12 through chapter 14. That's a lot of reading. And Acts chapter 17. But even during the Great Tribulation, Christ's faithful 144,000 Jewish evangelists will preach from place to place. And when they are resisted, they move on to another place. Now, I don't know about y'all, I've mentioned it before, but I have had a hard time moving on from somebody when I really felt like, man, they are headed for hell. And you talk to them till you're blue in the face. But when it's time, that time needs to be spent somewhere where it will count, where they'll receive Jesus. So be led by the Spirit in that, and don't take it upon yourself. All right, anything else? Nobody. Well, as always, I appreciate your presence, your prayers. Just to see y'all's faces, to look forward to seeing these faces on Wednesday night means a lot to me. All right, Sandra Bell, would you dismiss us?